Two years ago, I released a video entitled A Writer's Agenda. The basic premise is that when engaging in an artistic pursuit, the artist has a clear message they wish to convey. The purpose of books or film is not only to entertain, but to express something important to the audience. This remains true for media made for children. Going back to the 1930s, Disney's Snow White, for example, imparts simple messages to children, such as doing your chores, or more complex messages like how jealousy can consume one's personality. These films were designed with the child's age in mind, using vibrant colors and magical imagery. However, on occasion, the creators may be so focused on the message that they neglect the presentation. The reason we have a rating system on film is because some imagery and content is not appropriate for children to consume. This brings us to a TV series of pure horror that was designed for children: Threshold Kids.
In the aftermath of the ordinary AWE, Dylan Faden was taken back to the oldest house. Director Trench's focus on the Prime Candidate program meant that Dylan was conveniently placed to participate in it. A major roadblock in this plan, however, was Dylan only being 10 years old, with no understanding of the paranatural world. Before anything could be done with him, the Bureau would need to reshape his way of thinking. And this is where the Threshold Kids comes in. Agent Bethany Harrington, Department Chief of Parapsychology, made the initial proposal to Trench for the TV show. Reading between the redactions in her proposal, we can infer what she wrote. With the recent arrival of the boy, there are certain glaring gaps in the Bureau's ability to educate and raise a young child. Dylan will require a slow, child-friendly introduction to paranatural topics. Unfortunately, Agent Harrington was so desensitized by being an adult and working in the daily freak show that is the FBC that her concept of child-friendly became warped. Threshold Kids is not child-friendly by any stretch of the imagination. The color palette is dark and grungy, the imagery is horrific, and the voice acting is questionable.
I don't know what missing in actions is.
Despite Harrington advertising the puppets as cheerful, they are traumatized, depressed, and feel imprisoned. It's really no wonder that Dylan, who was raised on a healthy diet of this show, ended up so ill-adapted socially. Even with that in mind, Bethany Harrington's intention can still be seen within the work. If we strip away the disturbing presentation, it's easy to see the message she was attempting to give Dylan. Remember, she is a psychologist at her core, so we can presume that everything is intended to convey a message to Dylan. One important aspect of the show is the characters themselves. Topher is intended to be a stand-in for Dylan, someone he can connect with. Additionally, Meg, who's a redhead, is likely designed that way to make Dylan associate her with his sister Jessie. Since Meg looks like the only remaining member of his family, Bethany uses this character like a carrot on a stick to influence him.
The first episode, entitled Missing Mama, does a couple of things. One, it instructs Dylan that sometimes the director will withhold information by redacting official documents. In the TV program, this information involved details about the death of Meg's mother. Even when information is desirable, the viewer is being told that they are not allowed to question it. A second theme in this episode is the absence of the character's parents. Topher's mother went missing in action while Meg's died, but the details are redacted. One easy way to make the audience empathize with the character is to give them something to relate to. During the ordinary AWE, Dylan lost his parents. Through the narrative of Missing Mama, he is informed he will never find out what happened to his parents, and he is not allowed to ask. Moving on, let's take a look at the second episode. It begins with the pair doing some drawings. Meg gives a brief explanation about the Black Pyramid and the astral plane. Right off the bat, the imagery of the board is given to the young viewer.
Astral plane. It's a weird, crazy alien dimension. The white goes on forever. You can get lost in all that white. and never find your way back home.
While this may be me overanalyzing a bit, the imagery drawn is that the only way to orient yourself to find your way home is by locating and going towards the Black Pyramid. According to the door in the ocean view, this is symbolic for the oldest house. On top of this, the FBC holds the pyramid as an important symbol for itself. This sense of importance is being passed on to Dylan. Again, Topher mentions he misses his home, giving Dylan something to connect to emotionally. An episode on altered items is found later in the Panopticon archives. This largely innocuous episode is one of the most innocent. Topher finds a TV set that wasn't there before, but Meg warns him about touching it. Eventually though, they do, and it begins flying around as they scream. The intention of this episode is to teach Dylan to be wary of things as they may be altered items. The screaming and flashing lights serves to give a sense of fear and associate it with not being careful with mysterious objects. Another episode called Keeping Secrets again serves two purposes. Mr. Bones is introduced as an instructor and discusses how those outside of the oldest house cannot be told the Bureau's secrets. Obviously, children are chatty, so they must reinforce that he cannot disclose classified information. More importantly, the moment Topher made a mistake on what was and was not considered to be a secret, he is chastised by Mr. Bones. Any more slip-ups like this, and he will never be allowed to leave the house again.
Topher. Too many slip-ups and your father will have to go on vacation without you. You don't want to end up like Meg, do you?
I'm not allowed to go outside anymore.
Dylan obviously wants to go to the outside world again, and this episode is point-blank telling him that unless he accepts their dogma and rules fully, he will eternally be a prisoner. Much like the altered item episode, this one called When You're Caught in a House Shift is more informative than messaging. Topher experiences a house shift and freaks out after Mr. Bones sets down a device to stop it. It justifies the importance of control points. The more interesting part, which is largely overlooked, is the book Topher is reading at the start. It is titled Gone, and may be the first book in a real-world book series of the same name. Most likely it is here because the plot somewhat mirrors Dylan's experience in Ordinary. The premise of this book series involves a town where every individual in it over the age of 15 vanished without a trace. Some of the children that remain gain superpowers and must deal with various monsters. Given that the adults of Ordinary vanished and the children dealt with the Knot Mother, the Dung Monkeys, and met Polaris, it makes sense that Dylan would engage with the story. It also leads into the next episode by making the boy curious about him having any powers. This next episode focuses on paranatural abilities and the role of the director. One aspect of this episode is to invite Meg, and by extension, Dylan, to reveal any special powers that he may have. In the aftermath of the Ordinary AWE, the Bureau had no way of knowing if there were any lingering effects. Besides this, fear is used to influence Meg's behavior. Each interruption is followed by an almost demonic scream from Mr. Bones. When she expresses a disinterest in the role of the director, or the big chair, as it is put, he threatens her.
Everyone wants the big chair, Meg! That's why we're all here. Use those brains to listen for once, or the only chair you'll get in is the one with straps.
Dylan is learning here that if he does not listen without question and accept their plans for him, bad things will happen. The Prime Candidate program purpose is to prepare an individual for the role of director. Threshold Kids would be incomplete if it did not instill a desire for the role in the viewer. However, instead of creating a desire to do something in this kids show, they make the viewer afraid of the consequences if they do not do something. This brings us to the final rejected episode. The plot involves Topher making communion with the board and is forced into a psychedelic vision. All language is distorted, much like how the board speech is not discernible without the hotline. Topher finds himself surrounded by extra-dimensional entities, possibly astral copies or the id. Up until now, every episode was made with practical effects, but this one used visual effects to alter the video. Frankly, it is difficult to say what led to this episode never being released. Whether this was done by the Bureau, or possibly the board itself to prevent any information about them being released, that's unknown. What we do know is that this episode was found in the astral bleed of the Foundation, a place where no average person would ever find it.
If we set aside the imagery and general horror of the show, we can see what Bethany Harrington was trying to do with it. Tactics associated with propaganda were used to try and destroy Dylan's desire to leave the oldest house, to compel him into following the FBC's doctrine without question, and to ascend to the role of the director when the time called. Agent Harrington was first and foremost a psychologist, and she used her expertise to manipulate Dylan's thinking by means of a television show. What the Bureau didn't expect is that Dylan would grow up to be unstable and violent. Whether this was due to his isolation with no means of normal human interaction or development, due to the horrific imagery they forced him to consume for the Threshold kids, or the lingering remnants of his traumas from the ordinary AWE, this experiment by the Bureau and their chief parapsychologist failed. Control is not only the title of the game, but a pervasive theme that leaks into nearly every part of the story. The Bureau attempts to control altered items. The Board controls the director. The Hiss seeks to control the people. Control points try to control the oldest house itself. And through the Threshold kids, they attempt to control a child's natural social and psychological development. And as is usual, when mankind attempts to control nature in any of its forms, we learn that despite our best laid plans, nature has a will of its own.
I wanted to give a huge thank you for the amazing Midnight Morgan for lending her voice talent on this video. Her channel covers some spooky topics, including more content on Control. If anyone has not already, go check out her work and show some support. Her channel will be linked down in the description. I would also like to send out a huge thank you for community member The Yellow Bat. The editing quality is entirely due to his tireless efforts and countless hours of bouncing ideas back and forth. For over a year, he has listened to my crazy ideas and managed to visually present them in a way I never could. Thank you, good sir.